So before we kick off, I know there's a lot of new faces, a lot of new names there. So I'm going to quickly introduce myself and then our brilliant guest here. So I'm Darragh McKay. I'm the founder and CEO of Noloco. For those of you that don't quite know, Noloco is a platform for building custom apps for your business. So think internal tools, client portals, custom CRMs. And we integrate with lots of different data sources, namely Airtable, SmartSuite, Xano, Google Sheets, and traditional databases like Postgres and MySQL. So that's kind of a bit of a flavor of what we do. And today we're joined by the incredible Gareth Pronovost. I hope I'm not saying that wrong, Gareth, from Gap Consulting. Gareth, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Yeah. Thank you, Darragh. I appreciate it. My name is Gareth. I've been in the no-code space now for, oh man, about 6 years. It was in 2018 that I posted our first YouTube video about Airtable, and things kind of grew from there. I own a consulting firm, Gap Consulting, that has implemented over, gosh, we're definitely in the thousands now of projects that we've implemented, and we also offer some educational components to help folks kind of learn how to use all these different tools that are just revolutionizing the way that we work.
Yeah, nice. I mean, you're being very humble. You're definitely one of the bigger celebrities in the niche of no code.
Thanks, Sarah. Not,
Well,
I don't
appreciate you
think that
being
that
here.
matters much, but thank you.
Well, I don't know. I'm sure you brag about it to your friends, and they're probably like, "What are you talking about?"
Yeah, they don't
Uh,
care.
no, I'm sure not. But yeah, thanks so much, Gareth. I mean, you're gonna we have a very interesting session lined up. So for those that missed the start, we're going to be talking about how Noloco compares to Airtable interfaces. We get asked this question a huge amount. Obviously, Noloco is an app builder that can build apps from various different data sources. And of course, we integrate with Airtable as well. So I get asked all the time how we compare, why would you use Noloco over Airtable interfaces? So I brought on the world's leading Airtable expert, and we're gonna dive into it and see kind of, well, what we find. So, as I kind of mentioned before, we're gonna have a quick introduction. We're gonna then get Gareth is gonna talk about, his perspective on no-code apps and no-code platforms, and then we're going to go into a kind of side-by-side comparison of Airtable and Noloco. We'll pause for questions in the middle, and we'll have questions at the end as well. So feel free to throw any questions in the Q&A, and we'll try and ask them live when we can. So Gareth, why don't you take it away?
Brilliant. Thank you. Let me figure out. Actually, I think I'll need you to share capabilities for screen sharing. I don't seem to have them just yet,
Yeah,
if possible.
you can do that. Hello. How do we
Brilliant.
do that?
Brilliant. Nope, I got it. Thank you so much.
Okay,
Stand
cool.
by. And hopefully you can all see this. Please let me know if that's not the case. So quickly, just want to go through a little bit of theory in terms of how to build anything in no code. I find that if we pause before we start building and we do the proper planning in advance, we're going to get much better results on the back end from what we put together. And this will also, I think, emphasize the importance of a tool like Noloco, which I'll get to here in a moment. By the way, if anybody is looking forward to having a hard copy of this, I'll share a link later where you can sign up and just grab this presentation. So really what I'm looking at is breaking this down into 10 steps for any no-code implementation. I'm going to go through this pretty quickly because I want to show you some live examples. But to start off, we have to identify our problem or the issue that we're trying to solve. And of course, understanding how that impacts the different folks who are going to be interacting with this system, and also, interact, or rather, how it impacts the folks who are managing the teams and running the businesses, et cetera. This is going to help us really prioritize how much we need to build this thing, and also allow us to understand really the gravity of the situation. Is this something we need to address today? Or is this something that can be postponed until later? I've got about 100 different projects that I want to build. but only one or two that's actively being built at any moment in time. So then we move into step 2, outlining the process. Really, really important that we understand the existing workflow before we build this no-code solution. And then from that, highlight those inefficiencies where we could streamline this process and ultimately build the target workflow that we envision. If we don't map this out, then we're going to wind up building something that is not scalable. We're going to start adding bells and whistles that nobody cares about. So it's really important that we understand the outline of what we're doing first. Once we have that, we can take into the third step, where we're going to actually create a list of things that we are going to build. If you skip this step, you'll wind up, again, building things you don't need, not building things you do need. So I strongly recommend in your planning process that you actually come out and you, on the third bullet point, I like to highlight user stories. The idea that we are saying, as a client, I can submit a form through the website. Talk about the specific action that you want someone to take in a specific part of the workflow or process. If you don't outline this, then you have no capability to go back and say, that the thing that I build, does it meet all of the requirements? So effectively, this becomes your marching orders once you've created your backlog and you've listed out your events. This becomes the marching orders for what you're going to be building in no code. All right, what are we on 4? This is feature identification, where we're talking about the key features that we're going to require in a software. I want to highlight to you that we're on step 4, and we haven't even talked about what software we're using yet. And I think this is a big mistake that a lot of no-code builders make, is that they fall in love with a specific tool and they try to bend it to their will, rather than finding the best tool for the specific solution that you're trying to build. And again, this is going to tie into where Noloco really excels today. But I like to think of all no-code tools as filling at least one of these 3 buckets or key features. And this is how I think of all tools in the no-code space. Every solution that we build is going to fit at least one of these 3 things. We need to store the data somewhere. So where does the data live? We need to move the data. So that's done through automation. And then we need to allow people to interact with the data. And this is done through interfaces. Now, almost every tool in the no-code space started with one of these 3 features in mind. And as we've seen in recent years, they're starting to expand and grow across the 3 different key feature buckets. And as Darragh will speak to today, I'm sure, Noloco is actually capable of doing all 3 of these things. It is also capable, started originally as more of that interface front end, but now we can store data there, and we can also trigger automations and workflows through the tool. So wherever we can find these tools that are doing more of the lifting for us, the better. Taking us to step 5 then, now that we understand the key things that we need to build and the features that we need for our end solution, we can start picking the platforms that we're going to use. So compare the different tools, make sure they integrate. Almost all of them do talk to each other, the big players anyway, and make sure that you're finding tools that suit your needs. Now we're actually to the building, like halfway through the steps, and this is where we're going to start breaking ground, right? So we're going to build our first iteration, and I think it's important to note that everything that we're doing in no code is an iterative process. Building is never truly done. It's a living, breathing thing that you're building, and you're going to continually improve this over time. And be sure to involve those end users for feedback. It's going to make sure that you get to your ideal outcome much more quickly. So this is where you're actually breaking ground. And as I mentioned, it's going to be iterative. We're going to get back to that in a minute. But after you've built your MVP, you can start testing it, make sure that it works. This is step 7. Step 8 is where we're actually going to implement this. So you're going to roll it out, put in any user documentation you need, and make sure that it's getting adopted, right? You're going to see better adoption rates the more you involve those end users throughout the building process, by the way. Step 9, we're going to refine this continuously. It's always going to go. I mean, you're always going to be making improvements. And the power of no code, in my opinion, yes, it allows you to implement and deploy very quickly, but also your business process is not necessarily set in stone. I know mine has evolved over the years many times. As your process changes, your tools need to change with you. Noloco is perfect for that. It allows you to, be flexible, change what people have access to, improve your workflows, etc. And that's why I like to think of this as a continuous and iterative process. And then lastly, you have to come up with a support plan. It really, and I like to tie this back to the very first step where we identified the actual problem and the magnitude of the problem. If there are hundreds of people using this no-code solution that you're deploying, I've seen it where, 2 full-time people are dedicated to supporting a system, 80 hours a week. I've also seen it where it's a smaller team and it's not such a huge need. And maybe it's like 1 hour a week of office hours where, whoever built the solution is making sure to support it and deploy it to the team. So it really depends on the magnitude of the problem you're solving and what you're building. Anyway, as I mentioned, if you're interested in collecting these slides, please, I welcome you to do so. I will share a link here with the chat. I think this might be only going to hosts and panelists. So if Jill, our lovely moderator, could share that with everybody, that'd be awesome.
Brilliant.
So now that
I think
oh, sorry, Darragh, go ahead.
Great point there, guys. Sorry to cut across. Yeah, no, I particularly love the kind of last few slides. I think, you touched on people jumping into it and kind of, not even considering what tool they're using. But I think the continuous iteration is stood out to me in particular as well. People kind of think they need to get it right the first time. And that'll be it. But you're much like any sort of product development, you're never going to get it right the first time. You're always going to have to see how the process is working for you and your team or you and the stakeholders, and then refine and kind of adjust as you kind of go along. So yeah, you need to make sure whatever you're using is flexible to do that right.
Absolutely. And be understanding of that, I think, up front. It's not going to be a one and done. And if we go into it with that expectation, I think we're going to be disappointed. But I would argue that, in fact, it's much more powerful to have something that is living and breathing, that can change with you. And that's the whole point of no code, allowing the people who control the process to have control over the system as well, instead of needing to go to the IT or tech team, right?
Yeah, I literally had this conversation with someone yesterday. Exactly that, they just they built something before and then they ran out of the resources to kind of actually improve it as time went on. And now they're looking at a no-code solution, and here we are.
Yeah. Brilliant.
Great. I'll hand it back over to you.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you. So I guess as a next point, then I want to demo an Airtable solution. And I believe, Darragh, that we're both using the same solution. I might have made some slight tweaks to it, but we're using the same solution in terms of the data set here. But I want to demonstrate for you here today how I would go about building an Airtable interface for this very problem and highlight some key difficulties that I would have with this Airtable interface. Now, I want to actually address them up front so that you can keep them in mind as I share the solution with you. But let me go ahead and share my screen here. So number one, every user that we add to an Airtable interface is going to incur a new charge. Number two, difficulty conditionally hiding pages and tabs and sections and fields. It's very difficult in Airtable interfaces to control this at like a page level. I'll show you some ways that we can kind of work around this, but it's less than ideal. Number three, there's absolutely no custom branding or custom domain capabilities for an Airtable interface. So when we're allowing people to access this, we're losing the ability to really control the message. And lastly, there's absolutely no custom code yet in Airtable interfaces. And so if we want to do anything a little bit more creative than the basic software would allow, we're kind of out of luck. We have guardrails on. This could be good and bad, right? If you're new to no code, you might say, I don't want I want guardrails, right? I'm new. I don't know what I'm doing quite yet. But as you become more advanced in your implementations, uh, you're almost certain to come to a point where you say, hey, I want to do this thing, but I just can't do it in here because I have no custom code. So let me really quickly walk you through an Airtable backend. Again, we're going to be sharing this, we're working from the same place here. Pretty straightforward and simple. I have users, two types of users, as you see. I've got clients and I have admin. We can think of admin as folks who are internal to our organization, and we can think of clients as, well, people who are external, people we're working for. These clients, these are individuals, but they link to a client account. So we have a linked relationship here where we would say, okay, Pinnacle Health Partners, the person is James Allen, the organization is this. We have payments, so we can track all the different payments. This is all fictional data, by the way. We can see the status, whether it's collected or still awaiting collection. Payments, and of course, we have projects, and then tasks that are on behalf of projects, tasks being our fifth and final data set here. Now, one thing I want to highlight for Airtable interfaces is we use the user field type a lot. So if I scroll over here, you're going to see this Airtable user. This is a specific field type, and this is attached to an Airtable account. So the person who's accessing this is an Airtable licensed user in order for them to have any kind of utility inside the tool. Now, I've added myself as the user here for Ben so that I can demo what it looks like to see an interface from the client perspective. And I've also added myself to Daniel here. If you see Daniel, so I'm going to be looking at what it would look like to see the interface that we would use internally as well. Okay, so let's imagine then that we want to launch an interface, and this particular one is a client-facing interface. Like I want to create the ability for my client to log in and view their payments and also update some of their information. So I can do that with an interface like this. This is an Airtable interface. You see that I can only select myself, Benjamin. I am a client. I am taking this from Benjamin's perspective. And the reason for this is we've established inside of the interface here, if I go into the edit mode, there are some filters here that say, well, the Airtable user must be the current user. And if you recall, I made myself the Airtable user. And also, the user type must be client. So the only client that I am the user of is Ben, so I can only ever see this. Now, this is a little clunky right off the bat. I have to select myself. Like, it's kind of weird, right? But this is the only way that I can actually edit my information. But here I am. I see my information. I am Ben King. I can change my email here if there's a typo. I can see what organization I'm related to, although I can't edit it. And I can update this with a profile picture, if I wanted to drop in a picture and give myself some data there. I don't love this because of what I mentioned here. The fact that I have this drop down with only one option. It's kind of clunky and odd, but this is really the only way to do this in Airtable. Now, on the other hand, if I want to create a team directory, I should be able to do this in the same app. It's using the same user information, right? But from the team directory perspective, I'm going to have different rules. And here I would come in and I would say, all right, listen, I've got a team directory and this is AI, so forgive me for the people who all look the same. But you'd come in and you'd establish conditions. So the user type is not client in this case, it's admin. And so I'm able to see all of the different people who are the admin users in our organization. This is helpful if I need like an internal wiki, right? Where I need to log in and see who is it that was in charge of that project. Well, I can click into Ava and see, okay, that's Ava's email. I can send her a note. Maybe I'm looking at any open tasks that Ava has or what project she's on. Like I can see all this information here by clicking through the different people in my team. But these are really two different types of things, right? The way I would want to share this information, this team directory is internal to my org. This profile information is external. This is my client being able to log in and take care of this. So I want to go back to what I was mentioning here on the slide where every user I add incurs a charge. If I want to bring in a new client, I'm now paying $20 or $40 or $50 a month for that user to be added to Airtable. I also am giving them access to my whole team directory here because and there's no way for me to turn this page off and say, hey, this page right here is not visible to clients, but it's only visible to admin. Like I just can't do that. What I have to do, my only workaround option in Airtable is to create a completely separate interface because I can only control who I share an interface with. I cannot control sharing a particular page. So this is a weakness, if you will, for Airtable interfaces, and definitely a place where I think Noloco shines. I want to share my interface. I am sharing this externally, and I have no custom branding. And if I want to do anything super fancy, I can't add any code. So I've built some other interfaces here that kind of emphasize the same points. I'll go through them very quickly because I want to hand this off to Darragh so that he can show you how things happen in Noloco. But again, as a client, I might want to see my payments. So I'm able to filter down here to just my personal payments. As a user, it knows I'm the client Benjamin King. And so you see all of the payments that are available for me to select are all associated with that email. And of course, yes, I can turn on or off the edit capability. So I cannot edit this data. I can only view it. But then on the internal front, maybe I want to have an interface for my tasks where internally I look at my tasks. So again, this is me not as Benjamin, but as Daniel. I want to see as a member of this team, like what are my outstanding tasks? Where am I on a timeline? What do I need to get done? And again, this is kind of odd to have the inability to share just that page. I have to create a completely separate interface and share it internally, and then create a different interface and share it externally, and then incur user charges, et cetera, et cetera. So these are my sticking points with Airtable interfaces. I think they're a great tool, and I use them a lot, but I wish they were a little more flexible. Enter Noloco.
Yeah, I think that's a great segue and a great kind of overview, Gareth. Thank you. You brought up some really interesting things there, and honestly, if there's anyone who could demonstrate how to best use Airtable interfaces, I think it would probably be you. Can we all see my screen here? I should be showing an Airtable base, very similar to the one Gareth showed just a few minutes ago.
Looking good.
Cool. Yeah, so like I said before the call here, myself and Gareth shared this template with each other. I didn't build out an interface though. I built out a Noloco app. But just to kind of verify, this app is exactly the same, except it doesn't have this Airtable user column that Gareth added at the end. So you got users, you've got clients, you've got payments, projects, and tasks. So what I've done is I've imported that into a Noloco app. You know, the what you see here probably looks very visually similar to Airtable interfaces. I would like to call out that we had this first, but what you can see here is this is powered by the same tables that I showed you in that other Airtable tab, with an additional table called the Noloco user table. And that's because that's the table that drives all of the magic behind our visibility rules and our permissions, and it controls who can log in and kind of who can't, right? So basically on this user table here, not to get too technical, but you can see all of the same users that you saw in Airtable. And again, they have an additional link from this. Basically, the Noloco table links out to this Airtable table, right? And this brings to this table basically, and it ties it all together. And I'll show you how that works here. But to address some of the kind of points that Gareth brought up, right? So the first one that I think is super important is the branding, right? When you look at this page, when you log in, right, the only Noloco reference is in this black sidebar here, which is again only visible to builders of the app, because in Noloco, of course, you can invite people who don't know anything about Noloco. So all of the users that you have accessible to your app, they would log in and they would see everything that you see except this black navbar and this kind of what we call the build mode toolbar. And that means your app is completely white labeled, right? You also have the ability to set up custom domain. This one isn't behind a custom domain, but you very easily can. So it could be something like portal lily.gapconsulting.io, right? As an example, right? So, and the other thing to call out, right, is that this app is a client portal, like we've just showed you in the Airtable interfaces, except this app can support both clients and your admins, and it can support all of your clients, right? So you don't have to kind of set up different interfaces for the individual clients, which is something we see people do all of the time. Now, I do think Gareth managed to circumvent that ever so slightly, but when you have multiple people in the same that kind of represent a singular client, I think that gets a bit trickier, and then people feel safer, setting up different interfaces, and then of course that means maintaining multiple interfaces, right? So this app here, it's controlled. With visibility rules and permissions, it can support both admins and clients. And I'll really quickly show you how that works, right? So I'm logged in as Lily Nelson now. She is a team member, member of our team. She's not an admin though, so she can't see everything. So we have different rules set up, but she can see, if she goes to the projects page, she can see all of the projects that are in flight at the moment in a Kanban board, for example. But if I switch over to viewing the app as Grace Walker, one of the clients, this will reload and Grace will only see her projects, right? Straight away. And the sidebar will change. The users page that I showed you just a minute ago, that's completely gone. It's been replaced by this quite nice welcome page, right? Where it's kind of customized and you just quick links to bring you to different parts of the app. And even these can be hidden based on different properties of the user or the project. The same thing then goes with, say, like tasks. So if Grace Walker, the client, steps in to view one of the tasks, or we'll go back to the projects and go through on that side. You can see then that they can only see the tasks that that are associated with their client. But of course, if we switch back to viewing the app as Lily Nelson, that's not actually Lily Nelson. Lily will see all of the apps. So without having to recreate different views and maintain different views, you can very easily kind of set that up. And this is kind of interesting because it's actually not done with a filter, right? You can see there's actually not a filter set on this page. Instead, we do take a different approach and we make sure that at the source, at the kind of database level, your data is protected. So basically you can go to permissions here and you can see that I have a permission set up for clients. It basically says that the tasks client must be the same as the user's client. And that filter is what powers those views. So you don't have to set up the multiple pages and you don't have to kind of set up multiple interfaces, even worse. And you can also kind of see that you can change which fields they can toggle. So for clients can't change the start or end date of a task, which is obviously important because you don't want them changing your data or dictating when you should be starting and or finishing some of your project. And obviously the same thing with payments, right? Payments, they can just read everything. They can't update or create payments. That can all be done kind of offline with automations and stuff. So that's kind of like really, really high level how those permissions and stuff work. If I dive into a few of the other properties that are kind of more interesting, Noloco has a few other features that kind of Airtable interfaces don't quite have. And these are mainly just different ways of representing your data. So, these stages component is a good example, right? This is just a single option select field that you can present as a nicer interface. Of course, Lily can, change the values in these. But if we switch back over to Grace, oh, well, Grace doesn't have permission to see this project. That's good to see those permissions are working. Grace cannot. Grace can click this as much as she wants, but she can't change the status. And that's the same view, right? But it's because we locked that down. So if I switch back to viewing the app as Lily, you can see as well then that I think, okay, actually, I'll view this as Emma because she is actually the lead here. Oh yeah, sorry, it has to be in to do. So when this is in to do, And when you're viewing it as the lead, you can see that the start button appears. And the start button is, again, more of where you're kind of leading into the automations and the workflow stuff, which, not something you can kind of do in Airtable interfaces at the moment, right? So this start button actually runs a sequence of events, one of which is, moving this from to do to in progress. And it also fires off one of our automations or what we call workflows that will actually notify the client here. So and you'll notice as well that this button was only visible to Emma Baker and it wasn't visible to Lily Nelson because Lily Nelson isn't the lead of this app, or sorry, of this project. So once that's fired off, you can see that there you go, it worked. Switch back over to Airtable. You can see that market expansion. There you go. Now it's in progress, right? The client lead is Grace Walker. If we wanted, we could even switch this back to in progress from here, and you see that it was sync over in just a few minutes. If I haven't, or just a few seconds, sorry. Oh, there you go, right? The curse of the demo didn't get me this time. So let's start that again. You can see you kind of hit start, go through that process again. It actually sets the start date. Don't know why it unset there. But when it also replaced the start button with an end button. So you can kind of formalize your processes a lot better. And again, just really nail down who should be able to do what, when they should be able to do what. And I'll show you how that's set up. So we have two buttons here, as you can see. We go to action buttons. I'll just look at the start button. Basically, you just say it's a button, it's a modal button. You've got some confirmation or the modal text that says uses the project name from the page. You kind of confirm that the client's name, and the client email belonging to that project. And then here's the important part, the visibility. So firstly, these buttons should only be visible to team admins and team members, i.e. not clients, okay? And then it should only be visible if the project is in progress or done, right? You should only be able to kind of, I think this is the start button, right? Oh yeah, sorry, if it's not one of in progress or done, that makes more sense. And you could similarly set up a rule. I actually thought this rule was set up, but you could set up a rule to kind of say that the client lead ID is equal to logged in user, Airtable user. And that would only show the button when the lead is logged in. I actually thought it was set up that way. It wasn't. I think the finish button must be, but and that's basically how it works. And then the action is just to update the status and the start date. That's pretty much it. Very simple to do. And then I'll quickly show you how that workflow ran. So then when a project is started, basically, as these are really similar to what you see in Airtable automations, of course, if you do have Airtable automation set up, they will continue to run because we are just updating the values in Airtable. But you can do them here, and for a few reasons, these are more important. So basically, similar, you can watch the status field. And what I should have done is I should have added a filter here to kind of say only continue if the status is equal to started or to do, sorry, in progress. So it's gone from started to in progress. And then you can send an email to the client to say, hey, look, the project has been started by, and then the user who actually triggered this. But of course, because we have our own workflows, you're probably wondering, why would you use the workflows over, say, Airtable automations? Well, we also have the ability to send a push notification. And this will basically let you send a push notification that shows up in your Noloco app to the users of the client, say. I won't go ahead and set that up now, but you get the idea. And that's kind of one of the benefits of doing this. If you have any comments or any thoughts at this point, Gareth? I know I've been talking for a few minutes.
No, I do want to jump in really quickly though, Darragh, and say to everyone here that I am not educated in Noloco yet. I think I've played in the software for an hour, so I'm getting a ton of valuable information just watching this right now. I had no idea that you had push notifications, and I think that's incredible. And I've got like 10 different questions I want to type in the chat, but I also don't want to hog from people who are attending. So But just know, Darragh, that if people are not asking questions, I've got a lot for you.
Great. Yeah, so I just had a look at a few of the questions myself. So one of the questions from Caitlin is how do no local automations compare to what's available in Airtable? So I think that, I've kind of touched on it, but I will kind of show you again. So we have very similar actions, but the main one I'd like to call it is to send an email. So in Airtable, you're restricted to sending emails to base collaborators. But in Noloco, you can send it to your clients or anyone external that may or may not be part of your app at all. But then we also have app-specific notifications or actions, such as sending a push notification. We also make it super easy to integrate with Zapier or Make, or any other third party that accepts webhooks, right? But by letting you trigger a webhook. So that means the minute, say, a project is updated, you can trigger a webhook that will instantly run a Make scenario or a Zap. This is, compared to using Airtable, which relies on the kind of how often you watch it in Make, or you can have the 5 or 2 minute interval that you're restricted to in Zapier, right? So they can be much more instant, effectively. We can let you
Quick
update, create, delete records. Yeah.
Sorry, just quick clarification there, Darragh. Airtable's automations do allow you to send email to anyone if you're integrating your Gmail or
That's right.
your Microsoft. But if you're sending Airtable emails, then what you
Mhm.
said is right. I just wanted to make sure that
Sorry, yeah, you're all right. And I think it actually also depends on what plan you're on as well. But
true. Yes.
yeah. It is slightly easier here. We let you iterate just like Airtable. We have record comments, again, similar to Airtable's comments, but we can let you add both comments and what we call notes to records. So if you want to say add an internal note that only you can see, or sorry, only your team can see, you can do that. So again, that's controlled through the roles. So you might be commenting on a project, and you might want to ask your colleague a question about that, but you don't want the client to see, you can just add a note. But you can also then say add status updates via workflows, right? So you could, when a project is started, you could add a comment to say this project was started on, blah, 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 similar to an activity log. We have AI actions. Yeah, I think these are table stakes at these days, but basically integrating with ChatGPT. We have Slack integration, and we have some other stuff that isn't yet released, with integration with Docs Automator to generate a document. So more on that at another point, I suppose.
Ooh.
I think that
Yes,
answers
please.
that question anyway. Yeah, I think that answers that question. Another question was, we have editable fields on a page. Is it possible to lock them after clicking a button or using some conditions? This is a great question, actually. So you kind of saw that, yes, I can lock down fields based on permissions, right? But it's not as easy to kind of lock it down based on the conditions on the page, but it is still doable. So let's say if this goes to done, and I don't know why done is in the middle, but we can look past that. Let's say this goes to done. You can have two of these. We have the option to disable user edits, right? Which will, as you expect, just not disable edits. But you could clone it, for example, and enable user edits on this one, right? And then you could, change the visibility to only enable this one if it's in to do or done. That'd be one example. Otherwise, you could like disable this whole page from being editable, and you could disable this edit button or hide it rather. We have the ability to do that. You can hide the edit button, depending on states again. So if the projects are finished, you could say hide the edit button. Or of course, you could make sure that all of your edits are done through action buttons. And again, those action buttons could be hidden, depending on the different states. So there's a few different ways of doing it. That's usually what we recommend.
So just to clarify, when you mentioned cloning the bar there, what you were saying is only one of those bars will be visible depending on the
Yes,
conditions
exactly.
met. And so one of them is
Precisely.
editable, one of them is not. Does the page in
Yeah.
Noloco automatically refresh? How does that happen? Sometimes in my portals, people take actions that they shouldn't be able to take because
Yeah,
they
yeah,
haven't
of course.
refreshed the
So
page.
yeah, no, of course. So even if you refresh it from say here, you can see that like within a few seconds, it'll refresh. Yeah, it's already changed over. So I
That's
did change
beautiful.
out of build mode. So I'll do that again. I'll do that again.
Hmm.
I'll move it to and done. I don't know. a few seconds later. Of course,
The
if the
curse of the
change is
live
made in
demo.
Noloco directly, yeah, oh, there you go. Yeah, there you go. And you can see that this showed up actually based on it being done. If you change the value directly in Noloco, it'll be much faster.
Awesome.
Yeah. Um, Thank you. Um, Caitlin asks again, how could you demo how comments work, notify other users? Are you able to export comments? Great question. So yeah, our comments just live here basically. So you can comment on any record. It'll notify anyone who is tagged or who has otherwise contributed to that conversation, more or less the exact same way any other kind of commenting system works. You also have the ability to add the comments to the page, which is a nice feature. Um, so some people like to put these on a kind of on their own tab, so we kind of give them more space. It depends how much you kind of regularly use the comments. You can also choose to have the comments open by default. So, quite a few options. Again, what we like to do is provide lots of options to do the same thing, so that you're kind of not limited by your choices. Yeah, basically that's that. Can you export them? Yeah, I think you can export them from the data tab. Or you definitely can through Make anyway. But we are thinking about having a more of a central comments hub at some point in the future. More like an inbox. Cool. Let me see. Nail asked, how do we choose what email client to send emails through? So good question, actually. So the emails are sent through our system, but again, this kind of comes down to the customizability of Noloco compared to other solutions like Airtable. You can actually enable SMTP, which means you can send the emails from your own domain, so you don't have to go through any other setup. And that means they're kind of sent out from your email, from your domain that way. A little bit more technical than most people just like to know that their emails are going to get sent, particularly if they're just for like status notifications and stuff. But if you do want that extra touch of personalization, that's what you can do. Yeah, a few other things I'd love to touch on if before we have like totally just move to questions is the kind of custom code part that you brought up a few times, because I'm sure a lot of people are thinking, hey, look, I don't have any need for custom code, right? Custom code is, way beyond my reach. But one thing we see a lot of people want to do is embed uh, chat widgets like Intercom or Crisp or Drift or even like HubSpot tracking codes into their client portals, right? And if you're using Airtable interfaces, you can't do that. So for some people, to paint the picture of what I'm talking about, they're the little chatbots or the chat widgets you see in the bottom right corner. Because if you've got a client portal where you are, you know, working with your clients and your team, you want a way for your clients to be able to chat to your team when they have a problem. Of course, you can use the record comments, but you might want something more live, or you might have a help desk type situation. So with our custom code, you can just drop that in there. So we do have a little guide on how to set up intercom. You can even kind of grab the context of who has logged in, which is really important so that intercom automatically, shows you who it is. You don't have to ask for their email and the name every time. But similar setup for say anything like Drift or Crisp or HubSpot, right? So even if you're not like completely modifying the app with your own custom code, even just dropping in third-party widgets, third-party snippets is kind of crucial. And it's really easy to do. So you just head over to your settings, you go to custom code, and you can add code to either the header or the body, depending on where it should go. And it's very easy to do. I'm sure you've had to do a lot of custom code in your time, Gareth. Does that resonate with you?
Thankfully, I have an amazing team who does that
Yeah,
heavy lifting for me.
no doubt, no doubt. Excellent. All right. Do you have any questions for me, Gareth? I mean, I feel like that would be interesting as well. There's a few more I'd like to answer,
Uh,
but before we
yeah,
get too lost in it.
I also see, questions coming in the chat, and I want to make sure that everyone who's attended gets their stuff answered. But I'm curious about for you to explain your pricing model to everyone, so
Mm,
that the big pain point for me is, if I'm being perfectly transparent, I would never use an Airtable interface to deploy a solution that requires external users. I just wouldn't do it
that's right.
because it makes no sense for me to pay $40 a month per client that I'm onboarding into this interface. Like they're not going to get $40 worth of monthly value from it, right? So as much as I love Airtable, I would never do that. I would only use it for internal things. So
Absolutely.
how does Noloco solve that problem for me?
Well, you couldn't have asked it better, Gareth. Thank you. Yeah, no, so we take a very different approach, right? So I'll pull up our pricing, sure, why not? Make sure I'll explain to everyone. So instead of charging per seat, we have basically flat plans that give you access to many users at a time. So if you're a really small agency, like you're probably paying 20 or 30, $40 per month for an Airtable seat. For the same price per month, you get 10 users in Noloco, right? And those can be 2 team members and 8 clients, or they can be, 8 team members and 1 client, kind of if they're a really important client. It really doesn't matter. And then really just as our plans go up, obviously you get more features on our higher plans, but the main ones to kind of call out is that, on the pro plan for it's like $119 per month if you pay annually, you get 50 users, right? So again, you might be a small team of say 10, but you might have um, you know, maybe 20 or 40 clients. So you get 50 active users each month. That means 50 individual people can log in each month. So if that's a different set of 50 from the previous month, that's okay as well, right? So particularly that's really helpful for things like marketing agencies or any sort of agency really that deals with clients that has a rolling set of users that might, who logs in the first 6 months of the year might be totally different than who log in the like next 6 months of the year, or they could be the same. But really, just we count the active users each month, and we're kind of a lot more affordable on a per user basis than say something like Airtable. So if you did want to invite say 40 clients to your client portal, you'd fit perfectly on our pro plan, and you wouldn't have to spend what is that 1600 a month or 16 with Airtable. It's as simple as that. Yeah, I think that makes sense. Does that make sense to you? Did I miss anything?
Makes sense to me. Caitlin mentioned this in the chat. She said, in reference to Airtable, it's just so expensive. And, if you're to run on the Airtable business plan, 2 users is $108 a month, right? So,
Wow, that's
what
great.
you're saying is I get more functionality at a fraction of the cost. Um,
Exactly.
I still, in full transparency, I always build an Airtable. It's just like kind of a default, right? Like I've done it for years now. Um, but if I'm sharing something externally, this is makes a ton of sense. And there's just like I said, there's no way for me to do that really in Airtable interfaces.
Absolutely. And I think one thing I would like to stress, um, we're not asking you to strictly choose Airtable over Noloco or sorry, Noloco over Airtable. You can continue to use Airtable, even particularly if your team are just so embedded in it. You saw how quick the sync is, right? You're gonna make sure your data is in sync all the time. So it's really just if you're not okay with the price per seat, or if you're looking to give that external access, you can just add this kind of on top or to the side. And there's plenty of things that Noloco will do much better for that use case, and it's kind of worth considering then as well. The other thing I'll mention is, so while this app is powered by one base, you can actually add as many bases as you want, which is honestly so many of our customers do, and Airtable interface does not solve at all. We have a feature
Mm.
called automatic links that allow you to link them together, but more often than not, it's all through the user. So you might have data across multiple bases. You can pull all that into the one app. But we also know that, as much as, the marketing team might be bought in on Airtable, the sales team are probably still recording referrals in Google Sheets, right? So you can pull in Google Sheets as well and then group them all together. And that's something we see all the time as well. So people might have 2 or 3 Airtable bases and 1 or 2 Google Sheets, and they'll have it all in the same app, which is obviously something you're never going to get with Airtable interfaces.
That's a really good point.
I just
Really good point.
Yeah, one more question in the chat, or there's actually 2 now, but is it possible to embed a Noloco app into another web page as an iframe? It is. More often than not, we see it the other way around. So we have an iframe feature as well, something again that Airtable interfaces doesn't have. So you can embed iframes into Noloco, or you can embed Noloco into another place. Just remember that every Noloco app is behind a login, so it might only make sense for an existing, say, client portal or some sort of like internal wiki or something like that. But yeah, that's something we see people do as well. And okay, I see 2 questions on forums, so I will address forums. We do have forums. So let me just drop back and view this as Lily. Right, so we do have forums. So if you look at the project forum, our forums, honestly, I'd say a lot better than Airtable. So you can add a project. This exact type form is also available in all of our action buttons. So this here is an option field, for example. You've kind of customization levels on each one. So the project status, you could change that to be what the default, which is just kind of a drop down, or you can change that to be kind of colored options, which is these, depending on what you're into, or radio buttons. But you could also then do things like maybe the project files should only be shown when the status is, I keep using the status, but it's the easiest one for everyone to understand, right? So maybe the project file should only exist when the project is done, right? And then you can see that that only shows up then, and the required rules will only show up there. Honestly, there's a lot you can do. The client lead here should show up if and when the user type is equal to yeah, there's a few things here. So when it's done and the client is not empty, yeah. So if I choose a client here, the client field lead will show up, and this will be filtered to the lead of the client, just for simplicity. So we've
Ooh,
kind of got
that's dynamic
relative
filtering.
filters.
Oh yeah,
Yeah, we've had that
that's
for a very long time.
that's definitely not available in Airtable.
No, it's unfortunately not. But yeah, so and like I said, these are available everywhere. So if you're here and you want an action button to say update a project, you can say that you can embed that same form there and kind of get that granularity. And yeah, and similarly, if you say you're on a project page and you click the new task button, it automatically pre-fills the project. So you don't have to kind of get them to choose what project they came from. That sort of stuff. Really simple things.
Mm.
Okay. I think that's all we have time for, though. We're running down to like 3 more minutes. So I'm gonna wrap up here if that's okay with everyone. But thank you so much, everyone, for joining. I think this has been really, really insightful for me, and I've had a ton of fun kind of looking at how me and Gareth would approach the different problems from a kind of different perspective. Um, Thank you so much, Gareth, for joining us. I think everybody here does know who you are, but in case there's anywhere you want to, anything you want to add, where can people find you? Where can people learn more about Gap Consulting?
Oh, please, yeah. If you guys are looking for educational material, please first and foremost check out our YouTube channel. We are publishing anywhere between 2 to 3 videos a week, just trying to educate everyone about the power of all of these tools. And Noloco is rising in our requests from our audience, so we will be getting more videos out about that. And so find us there, and if you ever need any help implementing any of this, we offer both hourly consulting as well as project-based consulting. Check out our website, gapconsulting.io. And if you're not already on it, get on our newsletter. We put out a weekly report about the videos that we're launching out for free on YouTube.
Brilliant. Well, I'm glad I didn't try and say all that, but no, that's definitely worth subscribing to. And the PDF that Garrett linked earlier, we'll put that in the description of the YouTube video, and the email that we send out tomorrow. We'll get that out kind of first thing in the morning tomorrow for everyone. But thank you, everyone, for your attending today. And we'll have another webinar in about 2 weeks' time. So stay tuned at noloco.io/webinars. If you liked what you saw today and you want to get started, please feel free to start a 30-day free trial.